We'll start with news from Turkey because a gunman has killed at least 39 people and injured dozens more at a nightclub in central Istanbul during New Year celebrations. There were at least 16 foreigners among the victims and a manhunt is still ongoing. Some of the survivors spoke to reporters and described what they'd seen.
My husband was shielding me. There was gunfire. The special forces arrived and helped us out. My husband was shot in 3 places. There were people on top of me. I pushed them off. All around me, everyone was crying. There was a smell of gunpowder.
Well, the governor of the Istanbul province has described the shooting as an act of terrorism, and President Tayyip Erdogan has said he is deeply saddened by the news, although no terrorist group has so far claimed responsibility. Eyewitnesses, as you heard there, described scenes of chaos with crowds of people scrambling over bodies to reach safety and also jumping into the Bosphorus Strait too to escape the gunshots. Well, this video, captured by a security camera at around 1:45 a.m, is believed to show the assailant outside the nightclub shooting at police. A second video shot inside the club shows the gunman wearing what appears to be a Father Christmas costume. It is believed that 700 people were inside that nightclub when the shooting started. The venue is located on the European shore of the Bosphorus Strait in central Istanbul.
Saying in his New Year's address on Sunday that a blood stain was covering the world as it started 2017, Pope Francis urged leaders to work together to fight the quote-unquote plague of terrorism. Francis departed from his prepared text to condemn the Istanbul nightclub attack that killed at least 39 people. He was speaking to some 50,000 people in St. Peter's Square for his traditional noon address. He said, "Unfortunately, violence has stricken even in this night of good wishes and hope. Pained, I express my closeness to the Turkish people. I pray for the many victims and for the wounded and for the entire nation in mourning."
Well, last night's attack in Turkey did happen just a few hours after the UN Security Council unanimously backed the Syrian ceasefire drafted by Turkey and Russia. A retired US Air Force Lieutenant Colonel thinks that the Istanbul attack could be an act of revenge for Turkey's anti-ISIL operations in both Syria and also Iraq.
As the rest of the world looks at what is happening in Syria and pretty much agrees that the crushing of ISIS, which has happened under Russian leadership and with the help of the Turks as well, that this is the right thing for Syria, and to fight back, it really makes sense that this would be in response to that, as well as what is happening very, very slowly, but what is happening over in Mosul. Also against ISIS. So you've got in many of these places where formerly ISIS was in control, now they're under siege. We know that they have said globally that we would see ISIS attacks, and I think this is part of that. It may be a sign that, a sad sign, an awful sign, but a sign that the war against ISIS is actually being won now.
As the battle to retake Mosul continues, ISIL hit back in Iraq's capital, claiming responsibility for 2 bombs targeting a crowded market in central Baghdad. Saturday morning's attack killed dozens and wounded dozens more. Security officials say the blasts happened near shops selling spare parts for cars.
When we heard the explosion, we came to the place and we found many people wounded and killed, whom we rescued and sent to the hospital. Let me ask you something here. Why does this happen in Iraq? Why does it happen to the Iraqi people?
At the site of the explosions, charred objects were as glaring and disturbing a sign of the violence as the pools of blood. Baghdad has been on high alert since October 17th. That's when the battle to retake Mosul from ISIL began. This attack, coming just 2 days after Iraq's government announced the second phase of the Mosul offensive, underscores yet again how fragile the security situation remains. Mohammed Jamjoom, Al Jazeera.
Concerns over security have grown since a terror attack targeted a Berlin Christmas market early this month. 12 people were killed when a truck rammed into a large crowd. Berlin and London are among a number of European capitals at the moment, boosting security measures, installing concrete blockades and increasing police presence. And it's now emerged too that the man who carried out the attack in the German capital had been on the police radar but wasn't considered a serious threat. With more on that, here's Peter Oliver.
When 24-year-old Anis Amri filmed his video pledging allegiance to the terror group Islamic State, he was here in this part of central Berlin. Filmed seemingly before he ploughed a truck into a Christmas market. Killing 12 people, he called on others to kill non-Muslims any way that they could. But just 5 days before that, he'd actually been assessed by security services here in Germany and deemed that he wasn't an immediate threat to carrying out a terrorist attack. That's despite having known links to Islamic groups and extremists, and despite having been tracked looking up how to make pipe bombs online. He wasn't deemed to be any kind of immediate threat. Security services here in Germany use an 8-point scale to determine the risk a person poses, with number 1 being the most dangerous. Amri was placed at number 5 on that scale, meaning that he was of no significant immediate terror threat. It's left questions over how somebody who actually appears on this list could ever be able to be free to carry out such an attack.
Revelations that Denmark's welfare system has been lining the pockets of jihadists fighting in Syria has led the Danish Employment Minister vying to take action over it. Denmark's security service reported that 36 individuals apparently had left that country to join Islamic State in Syria. And despite being out of Denmark, they still received more than 90,000 euros in unemployment benefits. Even though 7 individuals were reportedly killed in action, their funding from Danish councils continued.
It is totally unacceptable and a disgrace. It must be stopped. If you travel to Syria to participate in war, to become an ISIS fighter, then you obviously do not have any right to benefits from the government.
Denmark isn't the first country either to discover its benefit system is being manipulated by terrorists. The UK found evidence its social welfare had funded the jihadists suspected of carrying out the terror attacks in Paris and also in Brussels. Well, as for the fallout in Denmark, we spoke to the leader of the Party of the Danes, who says the problem goes far wider.
What we are seeing right now is funding of terrorism. The state is funding terrorism, and it is not only sponsoring terrorism in Syria. Blood have been shed, let alone the last year, in the streets of Berlin, Brussels and Paris. And a little more than a year ago, it also happened in Copenhagen with terrorism. I could continue with this, but the fact is that the elites ignore this fact.
Russian media say a plane carrying 35 Russian diplomats has taken off from Washington. All diplomats had been expelled from the U.S. According to reports, the envoys are accused of involvement in Moscow's alleged interference in the U.S. presidential election. The Russian embassy in the U.S. says the plane that flew in from Moscow picked up 96 people from Washington. They are the diplomats and their family members.
It's been described as a galactic gold rush, a race to mine asteroids. In the coming year, a number of companies will start testing technology they say will provide the resources needed to develop a permanent base in space.
They're orbiting the sun right alongside the Earth with resources like water, with things like metals, iron, nickel, cobalt, that we can put in today's 3D metal printers, and we can construct structures in space.
Private space companies Blue Origin and SpaceX are hoping for manned tests of their space capsules. And 2 space telescopes, including this one from NASA, which is designed to spot exoplanets, those orbiting distant stars, are due to launch in the coming year.
2, 1.
India's space agency plans to launch 83 small satellites in one go, something that's never been done before. And China has a mission to put a lander on the moon, gather samples, and then bring them back to Earth. That would be a Chinese first. And after a 13-year mission, the Cassini space probe will descend into Saturn's atmosphere, sending back data to Earth until it's destroyed by the planet's violent icy clouds.
Alexa, order trash liners.
I found Glad Trawl trash bags. Would you like to buy it?
Yes.
Artificial intelligence speech and language devices such as this assistant from Amazon are expected to become increasingly multilingual in the coming year, as what's called machine learning makes them more powerful.
It's about developing a new kind of intelligence that will initially augment our human intelligence, but that machine intelligence will eventually solve problems which we as humans cannot solve.
And some of those computers will be greener. Google says it will power its entire company, including its energy-hungry data centres with renewable energy by the end of the year. A new type of HIV vaccine will be trialled on 600 people in North America over the next year. It's already been shown to be safe, but now trials will test whether the vaccine is effective at preventing people from getting the virus.
The car's doing it all itself.
And despite the death of a driver in a Tesla electric car in May while it was driving on autopilot, self-driving features in cars are expected to become increasingly common as many car and technology companies team up.
The technology companies, the automakers are really preparing, so they're building their business models around it because there's no question that it's coming.
Many of these dizzying and disruptive advances in science and technology will provide solutions to some of the world's problems. But the greatest test must be whether they can and will improve the lives of us all. Tarek Basley, Al Jazeera.
All right, do you remember the case of the pregnant man? Here's a reminder. Thomas Beatty made world headlines back in 2008 when the transsexual who was born a woman but now lives as a man gave birth to a baby girl. Well, here he is with his wife on Larry King.
You run into any legal problems at all?
We have, actually, with her birth certificate. In the beginning,
what does it say?
Well, I filled it out as me father, Nancy mother, and they changed it last minute and they put her as father and me as mother. And then they changed it again, and they put us as parents. And that's fine and dandy, but we don't have a domestic partnership. We're not a same-sex marriage. We're legal man and wife.
So just a reminder, Beatty kept his female reproductive organs when he legally became a man 15 years ago. His baby was conceived through artificial insemination, and the couple, they've since had 2 babies using a donor sperm and Beatty's own eggs. So now, fast track, this story is back in the headlines. And in the courts, CNN legal analyst Sunny Hostin is here. So, Sunny, what's happening?
Well, what's happening is that Thomas wants a divorce, right? They've been together for 9 years, and he wants out. He wants a divorce. They were married legally in Hawaii as a man and a woman because in Hawaii they did grant him a new birth certificate, a birth certificate as a man. Well, they moved to Arizona where they filed for divorce, and it was quite interesting because the Arizona judge ruled that there was insufficient evidence that he was a man when they married, and because Arizona has a ban against same-sex marriage, this judge has said, well, this 9-year union cannot be recognized as valid because in Arizona, same-sex marriages aren't allowed. So a really, really difficult legal point that's very, very nuanced, but they are saying in Arizona that this marriage that was legal in Hawaii is now not legal.
And to Brazil now, where a gunman has killed at least 11 people before committing suicide during New Year celebrations in the southeastern city of Campinas. The shooter stormed a house party late on Saturday. Police say he is believed to have been angry over his separation from his ex-wife, who was among those killed. Local media report the couple's 8-year-old son is also among the dead. The death toll is expected to rise, as local media say several of the injured are in a critical condition. Although Brazil struggles with high rates of crime and violence, mass shootings like this are rare.
Relatives of inmates tried to storm the prison gates as they pleaded for word of their loved ones. Authorities said it took 18 hours for them to recover control of the facility outside the Amazon River city of Manaus. Inside, bodies of mutilated victims were piled up in a corridor. Some were reported decapitated.
Unfortunately, there were deaths. We had them outside the prison. They were thrown outside the prison by the criminals themselves. There were escapes. We don't know yet how many, but we are searching for the escapees.
According to Brazilian news outlets, a group of inmates exchanged gunfire with police and held 12 guards and dozens of other prisoners hostage. The riot pitted members of Brazil's most powerful drug gang, the PCC, with a local group tied to the Red Command, Brazil's second-largest criminal syndicate.
My son is imprisoned in there. I want to know about my son. My son is there. Look at this bullet.
A truce between the two gangs broke down several months ago, sparking battles at other prisons. Brazil has one of the world's biggest prison systems, housing more than 500,000 inmates and growing by more than 5 times in the past 20 years. International observers say all the facilities are extremely overcrowded. And with 70% of all released inmates offending again, the system is likely to remain under stress. Tom Ackerman, Al Jazeera.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is officially a suspect in a criminal investigation in Israel. Police and the Attorney General saying he is suspected of having received gifts and benefits from businessmen, though they won't say too much more about the suspicions, fearing the investigation may become biased one way or another if they reveal too many details. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly denounced the allegations and the investigation against him. This is what he posted, or part of what he posted, on his Facebook page on New Year's Day. He said, "Unfortunately, you'll have to be disappointed this time as well, like you were disappointed on previous affairs. As usual, there will not be anything because there is nothing. Try replacing the Prime Minister at the ballot box, as is customary in a democracy." There, Netanyahu is referencing a previous criminal investigation into his affairs that happened back in the late 90s during his first term as Prime Minister. It didn't lead to an indictment and didn't lead to any charges. Netanyahu predicting this current investigation won't lead to any charges as well. Now, this started about 6 months ago as an examination, as the Attorney General, Avichai Mendelblit, looked into affairs relating to the Prime Minister. But the Attorney General said it wasn't until a month ago that they had the evidence to believe this would lead to a criminal investigation. So what happens now? Well, Netanyahu doesn't have to do anything as long as this remains a criminal investigation without an indictment. Under Israeli law, only when it becomes a conviction, and that conviction is upheld at the highest levels, the Israeli High Court, does he have to resign. That being said, if this becomes an indictment with serious charges, he may face tremendous political pressure and public pressure to step down. But we're not there yet. At the moment, this is the beginning of a criminal investigation. Police investigators were at his house for about 3 hours on Monday night. This is just the first stage. It remains a criminal investigation, and that is where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu predicts it will end. Oren Lieberman, CNN, Jerusalem.
And Emily, right now we can tell you at least 4 people are dead after those storms raged across the area. This is some video in overnight from Alabama. That's where officials say 4 people were killed when a tree crushed their mobile home in Rehoboth, which is in the southwestern part of the state. There were multiple reports of tornadoes there. And take a look at this video from that same area of the state. Heavy rain and strong winds severely damaging a zoo in Gulf Shores. A lion habitat there was crushed by the storm, but the animal inside was okay. Mississippi also hit hard by the storms. Several homes were ripped apart in Mendenhall. More than 30,000 people in that state losing power at the height of the storm. Cleanup in those communities is just beginning this morning. We'll continue to bring you the new information as it comes in.